Hello and welcome to Intro to Graphic Design. I'm Alvalyn Lundgren, your instructor. Let's begin by looking at some definitions so we have a common understanding of what we're doing. So the first definition is, what is design? So design in general is a planned arrangement of elements that form a visual pattern. A visual pattern means that things are placed, things are recurring, things are situated within a design space. By being planned and arranged, design involves making real specific choices. Really, there's nothing random in design. There are sometimes happy accidents, but then you have to know how to make the most of those accidents, or if those accidents are going to work for the purpose of the design or not. Design is intentional. You do need a good, solid reason for why you make your design choices. So the word design itself comes basically out of the Latin, which means to designate or to assign a role or position to something. Design involves a variety of fields, everything from transportation design to fashion design. Graphic design specifically is involved with the ideas of writing and drawing. So it's specifically visual communication using words and images. And the word graphic comes from the Greek graphikos or graphe, meaning to write or to draw. So it involves everything that is understood as visual communication. There are subcategories of graphic design, such as web design, certain types of user experience design, architectural graphics. Graphic design as a whole deals with word and image either separately or in combination. Let's talk about what it means to create. Creativity does not happen out of nothing. You can't just sit around waiting for an idea to hit you. If you really sit down and explore where ideas come from, they're more innovative than creative. So true originality is in how you juxtapose or how you blend different ideas. But creativity itself is the ability to bring something into existence that has not existed before. So as a designer, you need to exercise your imagination and your ability to envision something before it actually exists, and then the ability to make it happen. Creativity always involves a thinking process, an observational process, and a work or production process, so thinking, looking, and doing. And innovation, again, is the ability to create something new, fresh, and original out of those things that already exist. So again, the idea of creation, the word comes out of the idea of forming out of nothing, but it also relates to production. To create anything involves work and effort and planning and forethought and intention. When we look at design as a whole, there are three things that go into creating and designing things. One is technology and methodology, the tools, the software, the hand skills, things that are appropriate in terms of what it is you're trying to create and how you're creating it and for what platform or distribution method. One of the things that I stress is that simply because you know software and you have a computer, you are not a designer. Computers are tools, software are tools. They are the things that you use to make design, but they do not make the design for you. Therefore, you have to be able to solve problems, think critically, imagine things before they exist, and create and innovate toward a purpose. Design is different from fine art, and we'll discuss this a little more in a few slides, but design is not fine art, it's not self-expression. We'll touch a little bit on aesthetic principles in this class, but you'll mainly deal with them in fundamentals of two-dimensional design or a similar design class that deals with things like balance and proportion and color and shape and line and space. We will use the elements and the principles of design in this class, but we will not focus on them. Mindset is the attitude or the point of view that you take with anything that you do. The designer is not doing the same thing that a fine artist does. So this is not about expressing your own point of view. It can be, but generally speaking, design is not all about you. You don't focus on yourself. You're not creating work for your own purposes. You are creating work for other people. So design is something that you encounter every day in the normal course of your life. Design is all around you, whereas fine art is something you generally go see. You kind of leave your normal everyday and go to a gallery or to a museum to view art. When you are designing, you're not solving problems that are only visual. So say a business comes to you and says, hey, we need a logo so that we can position, differentiate, and market our goods and services to the people that we want to reach out to. That's not at all about self-expression. The effectiveness of your design work is going to play out in the ability of that business to use what you've designed for them to grow their business. So design solves business problems, not visual problems. Design is going to serve a purpose for people. It's going to make their lives better. It's going to help them build better relationships with clients and customers and fans. It's going to help them sell their products. It's going to increase their ability to get around in the world. So it serves. So if we look at these two examples, this is a e-publication, kind of a white paper, and it's very well designed. It's asymmetrically balanced. It uses hierarchy. It uses framing. It uses white space really well. It calls out information and orders it and makes it legible. We've got good line spacing, good letter spacing going on here. We've got an illustration over here to illuminate what's talked about here. We've got a good headline and subhead. There's a logo. So this is not fine art in any way. This is a business communication that has been well designed. It's been designed so that people actually want to read it and will be comfortable reading it and not have to work too hard. Another type of good design, this is much more cluttered because it's dealing with a lot more information. This is from a website that sells stuff, and they've got a lot of different price points and different specifications, which the graphic designer has to make plain and simple visually. This is taking data and specifications and statistics and makes them easy to understand. So there's a responsibility that the designer has to not just make things look good, but to bring structure and order and hierarchy to a page, to make things attractive, even if there's a ton of information on the page, and to make sense of information for people so that they can find what they're looking for quickly and take action on what they find. When you design logos and visual identity systems and communication systems for visual branding and marketing purposes, you're not designing anything for yourself. So design is very important for identifying, positioning, and differentiating businesses and organizations and even people. Graphic design involves word and image. We have a variety of shapes blended into a silhouette, and we have typography. And the typography is interwoven with the overall design. This is a landing page for a design firm. We have Assassin's Creed, which utilizes an illustration, and the choice of typography is very important here. Very different than this, but notice that they both use image, they both have a human factor in the image, and they both use typography. Both images, although very different, were not created for the purposes of self-expression. They're created to represent certain things. As a graphic designer, you can specialize or generalize. You can do a few things really well or one thing really, really well, or you can do a combination of things. In job boards like Indeed and Glassdoor, there is an increasing call for people who are sort of cross-disciplinary. So people who can handle web design as well as social media or photography and graphic design. As you become familiar with the options and types of work involved in graphic design within the breadth of the field, start thinking about what you really enjoy, and these will give you clues as to what you might want to specialize in. This is a short list of roles and job titles that you will commonly find in the graphic design profession, and they can be in-house as part of an art department for a business or corporation. They can be at an ad agency, they can be at a design firm, and they can be within your own business if you start out freelancing and then move to becoming a founder, the head of a business with people working under you. So you will find these job titles in a variety of fields, or they all pertain to the creative designer role. So long before 1984, when Apple introduced the very first Macintosh, graphic design had been going on. And it's important to understand that. Very often people think, well, all I need is a computer and some software. I can set myself up as a designer, and that's not at all true. Design's been going on for centuries and even millennia before the computer was ever even conceived. There's a difference between actually designing something and the tools that you use to design. So historic context also informs what we design and what we're able to do. You know, trends and movements come and go, and trends and movements that came earlier influence trends and movements that come later. So there is a thread of continuity that goes all the way through human history in regard to visual communication and visual expression. The earliest known pictures or illustrations of life as it used to be were found in the caves in Lascaux, France, and they are huge underground caves. And these are several thousand years BC or before the Common Era. And we can see here something that appears to be a horse, and looks like there's some feathers, and there's some color, and there's some line, and there's a sense of movement and even a sense of a ground plane or shadow. There's a tail. We know that the horse is going off to the right side of the image, and overall the horse has a couple different colors on its body, and there's obviously other markings around. This is a small piece of a very large cave ceiling and wall that has been pretty much covered with graphic expressions. The need to communicate, to share ideas, to extend ideas led to the development of written communication. And written communication originally was pictorial. So it was done in pictures or symbols, pictures that symbolize things. This is an early clay tablet with some pictures, and you can see that there's 3 below, 4 sections above, and overall the space has been fairly well designed so that things are clearly understood. Paper was first developed and manufactured in China, along with the idea of movable type, or movable type led the way toward the actual printing press developed by Gutenberg in Germany in the 1400s. But in China, long before that, characters were carved into chunks of wood and then sorted and ordered, and that block was inked and then paper laid on top and then pressure applied, and you could make reproductions of the same thing and distribute the same thing widely. One of the first things that was ever printed was playing cards. The Chinese were using business cards and calling cards. They were distributing ideas via printed materials long before China was ever opened up to the West for trade. And so written communication developed either through characters or alphabets. Alphabets originated in the Middle East. Written language had 2 forms and began in 2 distinct locations. And then we move from making impressions on clay tablets to papyrus and parchment, which is animal skin, and then to paper, which is fiber. We moved from scrolls, which are rolled, to books, which have leaves or pages that you turn. And so writing, imagery, and printing in various forms were developed over centuries and millennia. In the days of hand-lettered, illuminated, and illustrated manuscripts, there were a variety of styles and types. We can see certain conventions: uppercase letters, uppercase and lowercase lettering, Roman lettering, which is straight up and down, versus italic lettering, which is slanted. Notice that there's a straight line on the left side, and it's a little more uneven on the right side. There's the use of an illustration. This is an illustrated book in the late 1400s, early 1500s, comes out of Germany. And notice we have an illustration on the left-hand side and the actual text on the right-hand side. The early type, the movable type that Gutenberg used, was based on the hand lettering of the illuminated manuscript era, and then it developed from there for greater legibility. But you can see we have a illustrated or a decorative drop cap, and again we have a really solid straight margin over here. So we call this justified or aligned left, and it's ragged or uneven on the right side. There is a little bit of attention to layout. This illustration is talking about this. So it's similar to a lot of magazine spreads or storybooks. This is a textbook, and now we've got page numbers and we have chapter headers. And notice that there's margin, there's free space around the lettering. The text now is aligned both on the right and the left. There's not a lot of breathing room between it and the illustration, but notice how there's an attempt at alignment between the two pages. So these are what we call conventions, in terms of they are conventional ways of laying out pages. This was originally printed in the mid-1500s. It is a block print. There is a larger headline and some descriptive text. This is actually a portrait of Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformation guy. So this was distributed as a handbill or leaflet. But notice the similar things that are happening with this that are happening in current cover design. We've got the large hero face, the type up top, a framing device. Time is known for its framing devices. We have secondary typography that is highlighting contents within the magazine, but you can see there are things that are structurally very similar to their precursors 500 and 600 years ago. We see the same thing in entertainment design and movie posters. So we've got the large head, the headline, a framing device, the headline, and we've got the secondary information. So we got the headline here and the secondary information here. So there are certain things that we use, and we use because they work and they make sense, and we continue to use them because they continue to work and make sense. To wind up this session, I wanted to talk about curation for the purposes of creation. We spend a lot of time looking at things. We look at videos, we look at photos, we share videos, we share memes and things like that. So we're very used to looking at things. And designers need to look at things for a purpose. Everything that we design is informed by something else or a combination of other things. So we design out of our experience and our knowledge. And so the more we have to draw from, the more we look and curate, the better able we are to create things that are new and innovative. We don't design out of nothing. When you first start working on a design project, one of the first things you should do is research, which means you're going and looking at things with a specific intention. So the idea of curating in order to create something is that you'll be drawing from one idea over here, another idea over here, and something else over here, and finding a new way of combining those existing things into new things. Sort of like the idea of the iPhone being a communication device and a camera, and also had computing capabilities. Those are three different separate ideas that have existed for a long time, but putting them all together was the new and innovative idea. Curating in order to create involves looking at things, paying attention to what you're seeing and why it's created that way, what was its purpose, and then you collect. You can screen capture, bookmark, and download things and put them into a swipe file or post them to your Pinterest page. And of course, you would have to organize, sort things, categorize, tag, title, whatever you need to do, and then keep them around so that when you go looking for inspiration, you'll have your own swipe file to work with. And then you can start making connections. You want to be able to see existing things in new ways, and one of the ways to do that is to look at a variety of things that would seemingly have no connection and start making connections, creating connections between things, and those created connections spark new ideas. With inspiration all around you all the time, and you're recognizing its presence around you all the time, you always have the ability to be inspired. Curation is part of research, which is part of the design process, as is the creation of the new design. The design process is common from person to person and industry to industry. You will modify this for your own needs based on how you work, but generally the design process has 5 to 7 components in it. Because it's design, you have to have a problem or a need, a problem to solve or a need to meet. So once you have that problem defined, then you can proceed to your research. And you can talk more with the client, you can research on their industry, so you do a lot of inquiry, research, and empathetic discussion with your client and even their target audience. With the research and the questions in hand, the answers to the questions, you start developing ideas and concepts, and you want to keep the problem or the need in mind at all times. And then as you develop ideas, you'll edit and curate those, discarding certain things because you know they're not going to work, but they were kind of cool ideas, so you stick them back in your morgue file or your tickler file and move on to trial and error and testing concepts. And then you land on 1 or 2 that are going to really do the trick, and then you refine, finalize, get them approved, and implement them for the client. And then you look at how'd they do. Did the client achieve his goals with the designs that you created? And you can't understand this until you know what this is. You can't get here until this is defined. Did you solve the problem, meet the need? Did the design reach the goal? You can't evaluate that until you first know what the goal is. Keep this in mind. I would write this down and kind of follow it. Don't jump to concepts and ideas until you know what you have to do. Don't jump to developing ideas until you've done this. So thanks for viewing, and I will see you in the next segment.